welcome. We're live now on Facebook talking today about the pros and cons of white labeling, right? So that is something that I think, I don't know, some people ask about in our groups that we've been a part of, and things that we can do, and what's easy, what isn't. I think some people think maybe possibly white labeling might be an easy thing to do. And I think if you do it properly, it's not. So let's first talk about the pros that we have of white labeling. Brittany, why don't you go first?
Yeah. So I think some pros are on the sales side, I think mostly, where you don't have to worry about, I think, as much like your lead sources and closing and all of those things. So that's an advantage, I think, is to be able to grow in that fashion and not have to be like kind of sourcing your leads, so to speak. Some other pros, I think, are just relying on someone who's been through the motions, someone who already had the growing pains that you then don't have to experience yourself. So, as far as like white labeling your own services, this was a question that I saw come up in another group. And I was like, I wonder if people realize that it's great because on our end of things, we get to experience so much across different niches that we never really would, I don't think, because a lot of marketing agencies silo themselves. We get to experience everything. So through COVID, I think our advantage was being a white label agency. We had some niches plummet with their clients. We had some niches take off. We were right in the middle where like we actually saw a dip, but then we saw it go right back up. So that's a benefit of learning how to white label your own services, is that you're going to have the fluctuation where it's great, and you will still experience, I think, some of those negative side effects. But what about you, Michael? What have been the benefits of?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason I started a white label agency is because I'm not very good at sales, right? So there's that aspect of having multiple people out there selling your products, possibly, and white labeling it. So people can obviously be quickly, and so that you can scale quickly. There's that as well, right? If you have multiple people going out there selling, you can usually scale pretty quickly. You got to find the right partners in that, but we'll get into the cons in a second. The pros, I think while a lot of people these days are talking about niching down, I think you get a lot of exposure to a lot of different industries, which I think is interesting. It keeps it somewhat interesting because you have different, like I said, services, products, different things to talk about. That is fun to discuss in the type of, when you're not niched down into one space. I think it allows you to, I think you got to be creative in the ways that you deliver services to keep yourself, separated from other partners, or you got to provide so much value that agencies want to keep you instead of bringing it in-house. I think that if you're able to do that, I think that's a pro, right? Because it's I like it because it constantly tests us and our systems and processes, and constantly has that type of change on that. You got a comment on that, Brittany?
No, I think it's actually really cool when we meet new agencies and they're doing something totally different that we hadn't thought of. And like you just said, like they challenge our ideas, sometimes great. And I'm sure there's a con that we'll get into that has to do with pleasing people. But the other side of that is that it helps us constantly think. We don't get stuck in our own bubble because we can't. We have so many other digital marketing agencies relying on us and thinking of new things and ways to position themselves. It spills over to us. Can you do this? Like, is this possible? Those are ideas that maybe Michael and I wouldn't have thought of if we were like in our own little siloed niche, just serving one particular demographic. So that's probably one of the biggest pros, I'd say, is it's like having people on your team who are constantly thinking of product growth in those areas. And while they may just like email a question over to me, it's like our brains just start moving in that direction. Oh, is this something people want? Is this something we should offer? And then it kind of turns into something usually. So I think that's one of the coolest things that I've experienced being on the white label side, is that, we constantly have our wheels turning.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So that's 5 minutes on the pros. Well,
Let's spend 10 on the cons.
5 minutes on the cons. Ready? You can start. What do you think is the biggest con?
It's pleasing to people. I think it's interesting when we have happy clients and not unhappy, but the white label partners will challenge you. So if you're going to white label your services, you have to know how to please both sides. White label, like agency owners, when they come to us, are looking for, good processes and procedures. It's more on your operations side. I feel like usually they're trying to make sure that you've dialed in everything that you can. And then they're also trying to make sure that you listen to them and you are there for them and you're flexible with them. So you have to please that person. Then you have performance related KPIs around their clients. So you're already, in the traditional sense, you have to show results and generate good leads and focus a lot of your energy on that with your team. So pleasing two people with one campaign is not, it's emotionally draining at times, especially when you have a happy client and the campaign is doing really, really well, but you have a person who's using your services and they just don't like the way you presented it. They don't like the fact that you do A, B, and C outside of an order they would do it themselves. So I think that's probably the biggest con from like where I sit managing a full team, is just trying to keep everybody happy at once.
Yeah, I think one of the cons can be is you never know the number of sales you're going to get, right? You have no idea of your pipeline. You have no idea of what could possibly come in, what isn't, unless you're constantly communicating with those white label partners. But that can totally fluctuate month to month based on what people have going on, what they're focused on, different things like that. So I think that is the hardest, and predicting scalability is something that's difficult, especially early on, right? If you have one partner or two partners, it's easier when you have 15 or 20 or 30. You can see a consistent growth. Like I always talk to Brittany about, hey, our agency sells X number of dollars whether we have a salesperson or not. It just does because these partners do it, right? And that's what we've kind of seen through our number of years that we've done this, is X number of dollars every month. Now, when we have a salesperson or somebody focusing on sales, we're able to raise that bar, more than what we normally have. But it's unpredictable at times. You can be very busy or stressed out the next month, which is no different than probably any business in sales. But I think that's like you said, pleasing two people, very difficult. I think there's a level of knowledge that agency owners have that small business owners usually don't have, that you're constantly, like you said, challenged as well. So it's not just pleasing them, but it's also educating them in a way that they understand that we know what we're doing, right. Instead of what somebody else may have said in the past or our approach or whatever it might be. So
yeah. I think maybe not a con, so to speak, but I think a challenge you face with white labeling is trying to make sure that your products work at scale, and you have to test a small motion and see, could someone repeat this 10 different times? Because the experience is really important when you white label. You're going to have a team behind the scenes who's working across multiple partners and multiple accounts, and you have to make it resemble if they were to hire an in-house team and have it all across all their clients. So I think that's been good for us. Michael and I are really great at this, but it certainly was a hurdle before, where we had to say, if we put this process in place, could 5 people replicate it and the end product comes out the same, and it looks the same, and it feels the same, and it has the same high quality standard? That's where taking your services and learning how to white label them, that's where I think the biggest growth happens, is always looking at it could this happen at scale? And that's where I think a lot of we get a lot of consultants in here who want to sell digital marketing. They struggle with that at times because they want to be so deep in the weeds with strategy and all these different things. They don't stop to think that this probably isn't a process that I can replicate when I have 10 clients, 20 clients, 30 clients. You have to think of it that way. So that's a struggle, I think, maybe not necessarily a con, but it'll be a challenge if you want to white label your services. You're going to have to figure out how to do it at scale. And that's how you should put the initial process in place. Don't just do it, a certain way and you're like, oh, maybe we get to 5, we'll figure it out. You should figure it out now, because you never know. Like Michael said, you could land a white label partnership or joint venture, and tomorrow you have 10 new clients that you have to take care of. You really never know what that's going to look like from day to day.
Well, and I think what you just said there is important. Like thinking about, scale early on, right? Thinking about that when you first start is hard, because you don't understand the pressure your systems and processes are going to be able to stress under, right? What works, what doesn't, right. At what level they need to be scalable. And I'd say we, every other year we're iterating our ability to scale with new tools or do different things and just leverage the tools that we have. So I think early on that's important to be thinking about, is the tip that we just set up there of thinking about scale early on. And that should be in any agency that you're trying to build, whether you're niche or a white label, right? Just really trying to think about scale and how your system will, I guess, own up to that, I guess.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about cons?
Not really. I mean, just another challenge would be innovation. If you're going to enter into a white labeling space, there's going to be many more people who are doing what you do, and they're always 10 steps ahead, or they think they are. So you have to put yourself in that spot too. Trying to remain on the cutting edge. It's really important, because you're no longer going to be the expert in the room. You're going to be faced with people who know your space really, really well. And you have to position yourself in a way that you are great at what you do, but also you're always changing it. You're always coming out with new things. You're trying to keep them and their offerings fresh, because they're going to look to you when they're trying to grow. So you have to think of it in that regard as well.
I'll think of one thing real quick. A con is, making changes is more difficult, right? So if you make changes in your systems and processes, you're changing it for a lot of agencies, and sometimes some love them, some don't. And you have to be steadfast in your beliefs of things are going to change, and you just can't go in and change something just because you want to. It has to have all the reasons behind it, and what, to make that agency grow, make that agency more efficient, or provide better value, right? That's the lens we always look through. So when we get challenged, because agency owners, no matter what changes you make, they always challenge you, is what's the value? Is the client getting more value through this change? If they are, we usually push forward with it and say, hey, this is what we're doing. So, yeah. Cool. Well, there's some pros and cons on white labeling, digital marketing services in general. If you have any questions or comments, please put them down below and we will continue to discuss.